call the meeting to order. We have not met since August the 9th, when we actually finished our work, but it was requested that we have one final meeting for the purpose of reviewing what happened and how the money was spent, and basically issues related to that as part of the accountability process, and I appreciate your willingness. If you notice, our numbers continue to dwindle because people that were on this originally are doing other things now. So you know that, but you guys have hung in there, and I appreciate that, because this has been a major task and a major effort at both transparency and accountability, and I appreciate your willingness to do that. That being said, you have a copy of the agenda, I hope. Motion would be in order to approve.
This is Bert Lewis, and I so approve.
Thank you, Bert. Seconded by Melissa. All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed? And we have before you, I can't remember this far back, but the rest of you probably can, the August the 9th meeting of the task force. If at this time it'd be appropriate to have a motion to approve those minutes.
Adam Prophet, I'll move that.
Thank you, Adam. And Bert. All in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you very much. That motion also passes. Whenever we have been very difficult on people at the Department of Education. When we started this process, we had 3 people from the Department of Education who were our primary contacts: Tate Tateman, Doug Boleen, and Doug Zeiss. Dean Zeiss. He's right here. Tate and Doug have both retired. So we ran 2 of them off, and the only surviving member is Dean. And so he gets stuck with us today. And so I will call on him to make the presentation. Thank you, Dean, for your work. And we want you to take all the time necessary, but I will thank you in advance for your brevity.
Well, brevity is the soul of wit, right? Thank you, Chair Porter. And I will try to muddle us over the line. Those are some big shoes to fill with both Doug and Tate, of course, having moved on to bigger, better things. So let's see, I think is our screen sharing, Angela? There we go. Well, that's coming up. So welcome, everyone. We have here at KSD formatted today's review and wrap up in the same format that we've been presenting this information to you since the beginning, clear back in early 2021, if you can believe it. So we're pushing 4 years of these meetings. But if you have questions as we go along, of course, feel free to ask, or I'm happy to provide whatever information you may need. All right, will you go ahead and advance, Angela? There we are. All right. All right. So we're first just going to, again, wrap up sort of the way we began. So you may recall that the task force began with ESSER 2 funds. This was post original CARES Act and ESSER 1. So, but we will talk at the end about how those ESSER 1 funds were used as well. But we're starting with the ESSER 2 funds that were run through this task force and the State Board of Education. So first, happy to report that of the $343.5 million that was awarded out to public school districts, $343.5 million was expended. We'll go here in a moment. There is a small rounding error and just a little bit that was left that we'll talk about. But the districts did a nice job of really sticking the landing, and that was largely due through the intentionality and planning that this task force brought, and really being a thought partner for the districts as things were being approved and reviewed. As you can see, the primary expenditures remained at approximately $89.1 million for premium pay, with $67.9 million in learning loss. And I might just flag that when you see premium pay, recall that a lot of that was utilized for educator retention, as well as additional duty pay for the additional work that staff were putting in throughout the state, outside of their regular contract and school day. So it was really an asset throughout that period, as we know, keeping staff has been a challenge nationwide. And so if there's no questions on this slide, we'll move on to the next one. And we did want to highlight, so I said we spent all but just a hair of the funds. Out of that $353 million, at the very end of the day, we did have just a little over 46,000 that was unexpended. And those were all due to situations where we work with the districts, but they had work that either wasn't completed in time, or in the case of a couple of these, they just had refunds and it went back into the pot, so it wasn't able to be utilized. But less than a rounding error relative to the size of the overall award.
Dean, this is
Yes.
Melissa. What was the fate of those remainder funds?
Well, so for these funds, just because of how it works with first in, first out, those funds actually rolled over, and we still were able to utilize through ESSER 3. When we get to the slide on ESSER 3, you'll see the final amount that actually had to then revert back to that we were not able to utilize here in the state, but it's as you'll see, it's less than 0.1%. It's an incredibly small amount, and far less than where most states ended up. Most states, a report came out here in the last month or so that sort of showed where most states were at, our average highs, lows. Kansas is on the extreme low end of really sticking that landing. The average is closer to 2% that got sent back out of ESSER 3, which if that had been us, that we would be talking many, 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 many millions of dollars. But we came in far under that. All right. So ESSER 3, the much larger pot. And here again, you'll note that premium pay, again, was by and large the largest expenditure. Again, a lot of that's for recruitment, retention, extra duty pay, as well as learning loss. Updating curricula with evidence-based materials and resources, a lot of additional instruction and coaching, but really focused on serving students. And of course, most of those costs are personnel related. If you go on to the next slide here. So when it was all said and done with ESSER 3, we had just a handful of districts that, while we worked closely with them hand in glove all the way through the end, there were a few that had either anticipated expenses, building expenses, or other procurement things that, for whatever reason, didn't come to fruition, or they had returns. And so we did have a handful of districts that, despite all of our best efforts, they were not able to spend every last dollar by that December 30th, 2024 cutoff to draw the funds down. But that said, $1 million is a lot to any of us. But again, it came in at less than 0.1% of the overall award. So compared to the rest of the nation, and even compared to most most programs that are administered, it's really hard to get that close to a zero, while you're also being good stewards of the funds and ensuring that every dollar is being utilized as it's expected to be. If there's no questions on that one, we'll go on to the EAMS. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. I skipped a slide. This is important. So before we head on to EAMS, so this, apologies. So as promised, we also wanted to include an aggregate of the overall relief funds that our public schools received. So this slide includes ESSER 1, 2, and 3. So even though ESSER 1, the CARES Act money didn't come through this task force, we thought it was important to share with you how those funds were ultimately utilized throughout the state. And as you can see here, when it was all said and done, it broke out over the course of, again, it started in March of 2020 through December 30th of 2024. So almost 5 years. Over that almost 5 years, there's a total of $2,870 per pupil that was awarded out to our public school students. We can break that out over 5 years. It's a little bit less per year, but and our average district recipient was $4,531,615, with the smallest being only $219,000, and the largest being over $266 million. And if there's no questions on that one, we'll move on to EAMS. And we'll hear about our private schools. So private schools, you may recall that our EAMS 1, which is the emergency assistance to non-public schools that became available in late 2021 and was awarded out in 2022, was open to non-public elementary and secondary schools that did not receive a second round of the Paycheck Protection Plan. There was a requirement that we prioritize schools based on poverty and need. However, when the applications were put out, we received a total of 74 eligible entities that applied, and we were able to fully fund all of their requests all the way up to their maximum ask. The report that you see here is not based on what was awarded, but rather what that was actually expended. Over the course of time, some costs were, because we budgeted high on the front end, some costs came in less than what was anticipated. But throughout the period, Tate in particular, who's not here at KSD anymore, but Tate in particular, I think, worked very closely with our different private school partners, and we tried to adjust and accommodate as necessary so that we could ensure that each of those private schools received absolutely every resource and service that they were entitled to under this program. And I will, there you go. Yep, that's good. For EAMS 1, of the original $22,959,964 that was allocated, we ultimately expended a total of $17,689,916. That's the money, that $17 million, that's what went towards directly supporting those non-public schools, those 74 non-public schools. After we provided every service that was requested and eligible, and as well as some additional amendments as we could do. That difference, though, that did not go back to the federal government. That money stayed in Kansas. We were able to, both for EAMS 1 and EAMS 2, for any of the funds that were not utilized by the private schools after we met absolutely all of their needs, we had the authority under the federal acts to revert a portion of those, to revert those unused funds to gear the governor's emergency education relief funds, which were utilized by KSDE to provide additional slots under the Kansas preschool pilot that was utilized to provide the Sunflower Summer program, as well as programs like additional services and supports to students with disabilities, and the employment opportunity, the education recruitment and retention project, among others as well. So every single one of those dollars did stay within the state and continued to serve not just public school, but private school students as well. Next slide. And then for EAMS 2, the last of the programs. You may recall that EANS 2, when it came out, it did have some additional strings attached to it. So while it was open to elementary and secondary, non-public elementary and secondary schools, there were additional requirements put on it by the federal government, by Congress. And among those was one, a poverty limit that a school had to have at least 40% poverty. However, Kansas, we were able to obtain a waiver that lowered that bar down to 20%, so that eligible non-public secondary and elementary schools were able to apply even if they only had 20% or below poverty, or 20% or above poverty, which significantly helped. And also, there was a requirement that they have significant mortality or infection rates within the counties that they were located. But because of how that formula played out, it covered virtually every county in the state. So we were able to really sort of expand the number of eligible schools just by requesting those waivers and really trying to do all we could to get as many eligible as we could. That said, when we put the application out, there were only 25 total schools that applied that were eligible, that met all of those criteria. But we were once again able to fully fund all of their requested eligible needs that were again brought back here to this task force for review. And much like EANS 1, throughout the course of the program, we continue to work with the private schools to adjust and amend the services to meet their needs, because as the resources are there, we wanted to make sure that every service that could be provided was being provided. I want to go to the next slide. So with the wrap up of EANS 2, that number's not right. Oh no, that's right. That's total allocated. Sorry. Let me try it. The EANS 2 total allocated was $12,972,094. So that was the total amount that the task force awarded out to the budget out for the private schools. The final expenditures after absolutely every one of those services was actually provided, because they did come in under budget. The total actual expense was only $10,198,061. And again, the balance reverted to gear for those additional services that we discussed earlier, things like Sunflower Summer and additional supports for students with disabilities and KPP, Kansas Preschool Pilot, etc. And I think with that, next slide.
Other questions? Let's see. Janet.
Yeah, Pete, if you could go back to the slides of the EANS, and I think we all understand, but when I look at $334 million going to premium pay to our public school colleagues, and that, that none of those others that have no bar on them were even options for us. So I just wanted to make that clear, because we certainly would have done that.
Yeah, that absolutely. That's a great highlight, that the allowable uses under EANS were different than under the ESSER programs, because those were of course stipulated by Congress. So
right.
In the case of EANS, every single staff member that was providing services to private school kiddos was employed through the public agency that was providing the service. So that's a great point.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out, Janet. I'd kind of forgotten. Anything else? Well, if not, I want to again thank you for your participation. To follow up on a statement that Melissa made earlier, if at some point you want to have a Friday afternoon counseling session, let me know, and I'll try to accommodate that. Otherwise, this will be the last meeting on the behalf of my colleagues at the State Board of Education, Department of Education, and hopefully all the schools in the state. I want to again express our appreciation, but I believe that the senator has a question.
I don't really have a question. I just really want to thank everyone for having this final meeting with the final update. And it really brings home for me the fact that those federal funds that came to Kansas, even if they, for whatever reason, in small amounts didn't get expended, they actually revert back to be used for Kansas kids. So I certainly think it shows that we were successful in putting those to use in Kansas.
Thank you.
And Senator, a large part of that, as Dean mentioned, was the Sunflower Summer Program, which, not that any of the expenditures by district weren't highlights, but certainly at a statewide level, that was a highlight that you all should take credit for.
Again, I thank you, and this will be the final adjournment. I don't know what to call it, termination, death knell, whatever. At any rate, again, we thank you and wish you the best weekend to come up and a very good future. Thank you.
Thanks.
We're adjourned.